Our presenter tonight is Phyllis Kombol. She's a DTM. She's been a member of Toastmasters since December of 2008. And for those of you that were on a little earlier, you might have heard her mention she's a member of 3 different clubs in District 37, which is down in North Carolina. McDowell Toastmasters, it's a weekly meeting, mostly on Zoom, occasionally some hybrid events. She's in Advanced Toastmasters of Asheville, and that's meets monthly with quarterly hybrid meetings, and then Eat Your Words, specialty club focused on impromptu roles, and they meet in restaurants. She achieved her DTM in 2017, and she's completed 3 paths in Pathways, working on 4 other ones right now. She's filled a variety of club, area, and district leadership roles. She's competed in many contests, making it all the way to the International Speech Contest quarterfinal in 2021. She lives in the Western North Carolina foothills, and her good friend and fellow District 35 Toastmaster, Carol Mather, invited her to present today, and her topic is looking good on Zoom. Let's hear it for Phyllis Kombol.
Thank you so much, Keith. Yes, I think we have a little story here to tell, because it turns out that if you looked at your calendar, it said that Carol Mather was going to be your presenter, but indeed, her Greyhound bus trip ended with her arriving at her destination, but her computer went on a little unauthorized expedition afterward and has never been seen again. So that made it a little bit interesting for her to think about doing this. So when she asked me to do it, I thought, oh, shall I panic? Oh my gosh. And then I thought, wait, I can do this. I can do this because I've had a lot of mentoring in this topic over the last couple of years from quite a few of my club members. So yes, we can do this. Why we're doing it is sort of another question. First of all, we have this whole concept that we have a necessity. We've been doing Zoom for 3 years, and yet sometimes we're not very good at it. And we can always stand to up our game a little bit, and it's not going away, because most workplaces, most professional groups, most community groups now use some form of virtual meetings. So we think it's going to be an ongoing skill that we'll need. And of course, as Toastmasters, we really should be setting the bar high, showing how it's to be done, showing the right way to do things, because we're experts in communication skills and trying to figure out how to do it well. And then there's that little personal thing that when Carol told me about her bus trip and her computer's disappearance, I just had to take pity on her. So we'll do 3 topics today. When I think about this, looking good on Zoom, it is the visual, because it's a very visual medium, but it's also what we hear. Our communication relies not just on what we see, but also what we can hear, and all the rest. All the rest is those other little tools that can help us when we need to really bump it up a notch and act like we've got the pro in professional. The visual, it's a big part of this, and I think about 3 things there too. It's lights, camera, and action. Lights, camera, action. Well, let's just take them one at a time. The lights. We have to be so careful to make sure we have some adequate lighting, to make sure we show our face. to make sure that our lighting is even, so we're not having one big shadow in one space and the rest of us overlit. And we have to have a way to manage reflections, especially for those of us who have glasses. The really bright lights of our monitor can sometimes obliterate our eyes, and then our audience can't see what we're trying to communicate to them with our facial expressions. So I'm going to challenge you here tonight. We're a small enough group, we can have some fun with this. I'm going to show you examples. I suggest you might want to pin my little square, and I'm going to ask you to critique. Okay, you don't have to stay on mute. You can go ahead and turn your audio on and tell us what's wrong here.
Well, something's reflecting, like an earring or something. That's the center of our attention.
Yes.
You're looking a little more ghostly than I usually do.
Yes. What else?
Blurry.
There's
Blurry,
certainly,
you're in the dark, you're wearing
Dark.
dark colors against a dark background.
yeah.
Got some sort of junk on the lens of your camera.
Yeah, there's something going on there. Something's wrong. And one of you noticed that there was these big reflective earrings, and so they're reflecting the monitor. And because it's so dark, my camera can't cope. So I've got reflection, I've got only half my face lit, I've got dark on dark. Absolutely. How about this one? This one's pretty bad too.
Too much bright backlight.
Backlight is a problem. You have to manage that backlight. And here Tony and I are in the midst of doing something, and I just wanted to put a screenshot. I thought, oh, I can make this a good example. There's all sorts of crap in the background. The two of us aren't looking at the monitor or the camera where we're talking to people. So we've got all this crazy stuff going on. And that backlit thing just can't see what even is happening there. How about this one?
Half the face is nicely lit, but the other is in shadows. You kind of want the whole face the same lighting.
Yes, yes, very good. And again, those big dangly shiny earrings, you have to be a little careful about those kinds of things, because I think most of our audience are part cat. They see something shiny and they look at that instead of looking at your face to see what's going on or what you're trying to present. I also have a big tall chair. That day I had this big tall chair. Now you'll notice today, if you look at my little inset, you can't tell. I do have a chair back here. I promise I'm sitting on a chair. But I used a chair that's much shorter so that it doesn't impinge on my environment so much. Very good. You guys are good at this already. What about this one?
A little bit better lit, but your camera placement is not the best.
Yeah, cut off the top of my head. So better even lighting from the front, no backlit. But can you tell by looking in my glasses what's on my screen? Practically. You can't see my eyes. You can't see what facial expressions I might be sharing with you from my eyes. So there again, just some things to keep watching for. Okay, now, here is my group from this past week. I did a little practice session with this. This was our hybrid meeting. So you'll see on the left of the top row, we have a couple. We're in the library, so we don't have a lot of control over our lighting and our background. But the two couples who were in the library, each couple shared a screen so that we could be there with our friends who were on the Zoom screens. So Tony and I are in that top left, and beneath us is the other couple that was on site. Then you see the top middle is a young lady who's got a virtual background. To the top right is a lady who's got a background that is a little bit dark, but it's just her real background. The one in the bottom middle has very carefully orchestrated her background. It's a real background, but she has it very carefully orchestrated, so there are things that reflect who she is and what she's about. And then you see Carol, who had to come in with her phone because that's all she had. So you see that those big black bars along the side, because with the phone, it doesn't allow you to use the whole screen. But we all had fairly good lighting that night. So that's where we start looking at how can we do this in a way so that the visual really helps to get our message across. Now let's think a little more about our camera. When I see some of these little cameras, I always think about that whole business of R2D2, you know. So how do we place our camera? How do we look for the quality of our camera image? And how do we make sure we get some eye contact with our camera? You can use the camera that's built into your device, or you can use a separate one. Here are some more examples that have problems. Talk to me. What do you think?
Good thing you trimmed your nose hairs.
I don't know anyone who looks very attractive when we're looking up their nose.
Your
And yet-
fan is on the ceiling.
My fan, the backlight, oh, my heavenly days. So, you know, when I was trying to do some examples of how to do this bad, I really set them up. How about this next one?
There's too much the balance of your body placement tends to almost, it's a disadvantage because there's the half of it above your head. Maybe the way you're placing your body is gives the upper side of it just too much unnecessary space.
Exactly. And of course, there again, you see this bright light coming at my face. I look a little ghoulish there. So when we are looking at trying to fill our little square here on our Zoom space, we want to make sure that our body in relation to the camera is making good use of our space. Very good. How about this one?
You mentioned the chair in previously. Here, the chair is much more visible. Now, to me, it's not as distracting, but given that you mentioned the chair, it's probably better if you would have a chair that's kind of hidden away from the view.
Yes. And then you notice where I'm looking? I'm not looking at the camera. I'm probably looking at who's on my screen. And then I've got some stuff again in the background that really is helpful or useful. How about these two?
One's looking up higher than the camera. The other one, it looks pretty good. You got the chair in the background, and it's blurry and fuzzy, however the picture was taken.
Yes. So when you go into your Zoom account, you can put a Zoom profile picture on here. And I've used these briefly for periods of time. The first one with the kind of reddish background was done with an older iPhone, and it was done the selfie mode. I think it's probably an iPhone 07 or something. I had to go way back to find this one. But the quality is very grainy. The one with me in the pink shirt with the green background, that one is actually just a little screenshot capture from a Zoom meeting. And then I think it was compressed because it is also very fuzzy and grainy and very pixelated. So again, when you're trying to think about how you present yourself, how you look as a professional person, how you want to be seen by others, you might think about what you use for your headshot, even in your profile picture. And here are a couple others. Now, the first one was also done as a screenshot, but I think it was with a better camera. And then the second one was done with a camera, not just a screenshot off of Zoom. Now, you'll notice in the second one, it's crisper, the lighting is better, but I have this reflection of lights on my glasses. So if I were using that as a professional headshot, I would probably go in and send it to my husband over there, who would put it into Photoshop or something and get those little white dots away. so that it would make it so that you can see my eyes better. But again, that picture is probably 5 years old. So I probably want one that's a little more recent. I had to go back to find some crazy examples. Here's another example where something is wrong. What do you think here?
Well, you're not looking at the camera. That's the obvious one.
And the jewelry is distracting.
Yes. Yeah. So here again, we've got the chair, we've got the bright light in front of me that almost washes out my skin color, the big jewelry being a little bit in the way. And again, you know, as I am working here, I typically work with 3 or 4 screens. So I have in front of me an iPad, a timing device, 2 large screens, and then my computer over on the side. But if I'm always looking over there, I'm certainly not connecting with you. Very good. If you don't like how you look, you can always go in and use studio effects. I would caution you to be a little careful about how you use studio effects. You can just improve yourself a little, but you might not want to get too crazy with the studio effects because it could get a little distracting there. I had to just play with it. Okay, here again. I'm making eye contact with my audience, but my audience doesn't get my eye contact. Now I'm looking at my camera. That's a real trick because if you're gazing at your screen to see what your audience is doing, how they're responding to you, how they're reacting, if they have questions, maybe they've raised their hand. So being able to make a balance between those two of looking at your screen and checking in with your audience by looking at your screen, but then checking back in by looking directly at your camera as well. Okay, now let's talk about action. When we think about our gestures, when we always did our speeches in person, we tried to make sure we didn't have our hands up next to our body, that our arms weren't glued to our bodies. But boy, in Zoom, when we stretch our arms out, we get a little bit lost. So we have to make sure that we not only have put our gestures right here in our little square, but that we also have enough contrast. And you see there, and I've done a few things here where I've tried to kind of make sure I've got my fingers over my sweater so that I get a lot of contrast. So you can see even in my little cameo down in the bottom. So let's think about gestures, body language, and our backgrounds. Here, you have no idea how many I'm talking about because you cannot see my hand. What about this one?
I'm more distracted by wondering where you are because I can see the barnwood, I can see, and you're at an angle.
The ship is
So I'm
lifting.
not looking so much at you, I'm more looking at where the heck is she?
Well,
The ship is lifting.
Yeah.
Ship is lifting. I think the ship is going down, babies. Okay. What else? If I were giving a professional talk, and many times people will say, you know, Toastmasters, oh, stand up to give your talk. It'll change the energy and, you know, how you do your presentation. I'm like, well, this sure didn't look professional. Now, I staged this specifically with this in mind. This is my office. I did put the room divider up. That is my door to my office, is a barn door that rolls back and forth. But here I am in my socks and my leggings and my t-shirt. Yeah, this is not what you want. And I had my computer just perched on my desk and there was something else on the desk. So it kind of listed to one side. And yeah, you kind of feel like you should go, which way? Are we going down? So be very aware. I did these things really obviously, but I think you can figure out there are times when you can do a lot better than this. How about this one?
I think you fell asleep. At least that's what it looks like.
You're
Sure,
thinking.
I might be thinking, okay, I don't know about you, but I'm also distracted by that bright spot over the left-hand edge of the picture. There's a bright spot there because the door is open, and I'm not sure what that's about. I was looking down at the notes on my desk, but it does. It looks like I fell asleep. Absolutely. Again, when you have to do these things, when you have to check in on your other monitor, when you have to look at your notes, you have to look down to refer to something, make sure you come back up and let your audience connect back to you. Oh my. There might be an audience that this would work for, but you'll have to be creative about dreaming it up.
The shirt doesn't quite complement the background.
Maybe if I was meeting with my Master Gardener group or something, but you know what? I'm not even a member of Master Gardener, so I don't know how that would work. Okay. Again, thinking about, and I think that was a hot day and I was all sweaty and like, okay. All right. Oh, heavenly days, please don't seize. Again, we
A little too
staged,
busy.
we staged this to say, okay, how can you make your background just go totally wonky and make people think they're going to have a seizure next? So not a good choice for background. And this background,
Oh,
Cluttered.
the lamp's way too much backlight and very point. That it's not just the entire background, it's just at a point.
plus
I
what's
mean,
not obvious is half of this is a green screen and the other half is real.
Oh.
So the books aren't real. I think I was a little schizophrenic that day, and I'm not sure how clearly you can see this, but again, I look very dewy. So, you know, this was one of those times when a little matte powder might have helped to knock the shine down from my face. And this was truly a schizophrenic background, and we staged it for that purpose because we wanted to say, well, what happens if you're in the midst of switching cameras and you've got a virtual background on one and not on the other? It makes a mess. Now, most of the time, there are backgrounds that you can make work for you. So I'll give you a couple of real life examples here. I'm going to go and choose my virtual background, and I'm going to switch so that you see my camera big, and I'll see what we can do with virtual backgrounds. Now you can't just blur your background. That works. It makes it a little less distracting. You can, of course, put a virtual background. My friend Alicia says every time she sees somebody's books behind, she really wants to see what the title of the book is. Might be distracting for some folks. Of course, you can use your background to explain what the purpose is that you're there for. We did a speech-a-thon. If you're doing something like this, then you need to make sure you position yourself into the part of the screen that doesn't have your background. So let's do something like this. Yeah. How about, let's see, what else can we do? Oh, we could make it look like we're outdoors. If your club likes to have the Pledge of Allegiance to start your meetings, you might want a flag. You could make it look like you're somewhere where you're not. Oh, the ocean breeze. Or maybe the northern lights. Or on a really hot day, could this make you feel a little cooler? You can also just believe that you're in a room where you're not. Now, I will tell you, I normally, when I use a background, I have a green screen, and I use a real green screen, which costs like $100. But you'll notice that without a green screen, I have a little haloing. And especially when I gesture or move, you see a little shadow of light around me that says, this isn't real. This is another one where you can probably tell that it's not real. How can you tell that this isn't real?
Nothing going on with the fireplace.
Yeah, the fire isn't firing.
Static.
And you know, here on the East Coast, it's dark at night. So that you see the blinds have a little light coming in behind them. That's another trick you can probably tell. But if you happen to be representing a particular company, a particular group, you might want to use your virtual background to highlight what group you're referring to. Or say you're the timer for a particular meeting, you can use your backgrounds to indicate your times. All of these things are things that you can use to your advantage when it suits you and when it works to your purposes for your meeting. Now let me go back to my little camera. I have to come back over here, turn that one. Now we're back to the PowerPoint slide and me in the little cameo. Now, we've talked quite a bit about the visual. Let's talk a little bit more about audio. What do we hear and how do we get our message across? Microphones, lots of different options built in. Some of them are pretty good. Options for non-built-in, quality placement, and what options you need for the circumstances you're in. Let's take a little peek. I'm going to play some little audio clips for you here.
This is using an external USB webcams microphone. This is one that we got a few months ago for about $50. It's from a company called Nexago.
Now, I grabbed that little piece from a series that I did a couple of years back, so that actually is a little bit older. But I want you to compare the quality of that sound to something like this.
I've now switched to using some earbuds. This earbud system is made by Apple. It plugs into the headphones site on the computer, and it has its own built-in microphone. It's designed so that the microphone is fairly close to your mouth so that it's at the appropriate level to pick up your speaking voice. I'm now using a set of earbuds that are very inexpensive, have a little inline microphone, again, designed so that it is just a few inches away from my mouth. It also plugs into the headphone jack on the side of my laptop.
I don't know about you, but I think the Apple sounded real muffled. So I'm not fond of those at all. And then here's another little thing. You'll have to listen very carefully. Whoops, I want to go back one. Back one. Okay, let me give you this little audio. Whoop, that's not what I wanted. There's my audio clip. Okay.
I tested this at normal volume. It didn't work. Now I'm yelling at it. These are Bluetooth. GID wireless.
I've had a few people try to come into meetings with these kind of things, and you can't hear them at all. It is so faint, and they're cranked up as high as they'll go. I'm not sure. And they cost a fair amount of change, so I'm not sure what their story is. Then let's think about headsets, because with headsets, you have a whole different deal.
In this example, I'm using a Plantronics headset. It has just one ear speaker and the microphone. It's probably been around about 5 years. I use it quite a bit, but one of its disadvantages is it doesn't block out background noise in the room around me. So sometimes I can be distracted by hearing one thing through one ear and something else through the other.
You also have to be careful about this because right down there on the line, there's a little mute function. And if you accidentally squish that, no one can hear you, even though you have not been muted on your Zoom screen. Another little trick to, now this is what I'm using tonight.
Here I'm using a lavalier mic, Alvoxcon. One of the advantages, of course, of a lavalier mic that is set up to be Bluetooth is you can move around. It can be here with you. You can walk away from your computer and there's no problem because the microphone goes with you. However, here is a possible challenge. First of all, because it is rechargeable, it has to be charged up. If you make big gestures like this, you might be getting some extraneous noise. Or if you have loud, funky jewelry, even perhaps you could discover that because of your place in your microphone underneath your scarf, and then it becomes a little muffled.
So the day I
tool,
Yeah.
But remember, the lavalier mic will pick up any sounds that are going on in your room around you, as well as what you intend for it to be picking up, which sometimes is a bit of a challenge.
So the day I recorded that, I had a big scarf and I hid the microphone underneath the scarf and it got real muffled. And I thought, oh, have to think about that. Now, this is another one of those interesting things for comparison.
This test is with AirPods Pro. They are new. If you bought them separately, they'd be about $250. I got them for about $90 because I bought a new iPad.
Now, that recording is also a couple years old. And I use those to listen to things a lot, but I don't use them in meetings because they are very muffled. I really, I'm not bad about Apple. I mean, I like Apple products. I have quite a few Apple products, but I don't like their microphones and speakers at all. So, yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Susan. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We'll come back to that. Here's another option if you're going to use an external. Sometimes the microphones that are built into your computer, if it's a recent computer, it might be a very good quality, but you have to be careful because anything that you do that clunks on the table next to the computer, it's going to pick that up. So you might want an external, particularly if you really want it to sound crisp and clear and not distorted.
Now we've switched to something completely different. This is a large boom microphone, really designed to pick up a wider range of auditory inputs.
So again, if you have a dedicated space to use, that boom microphone might be the way. You have a lot less sibilance, you have a lot more control. And actually, on things like OBS, which is the program that I'm using to present with today, you actually have some ways to adjust your sound there as well. Of course, with our tablets, we have to think about where the mic actually is, and if we're on the go.
Now I've signed on with the second device. I'm signed on with my iPad as well as my laptop. The laptop is muted. It's also hooked up to my headset for both speaker and microphone. You'll notice that as soon as I take the headset out of the laptop, you'll get some really crazy feedback.
There's a little bit of a high-pitched warble.
If I also unmute the computer, you'll get even worse feedback. Now, it's really crazy. That pretty zombie.
So that's one of the challenges you run into if you've got multiple devices hooked up to audio in the same space. Now, just to play around and try some different things, I thought, and again, most of these recordings were done a couple of years ago, so I had the iPhone X was fairly new at that point.
Here's what it sounds like when I'm logged on and entering a meeting through my iPhone using internet audio. When you get on with a phone, it gives you the option to do internet audio or to do dial-in.
And now for Throwback Thursday. Yes, it's Thursday while I'm doing this. I picked up the landline and called the landline number it had listed. It was a bit of a process, but I got in. Even if I had no access to anything other than a landline phone, I could still get into the meeting and join by phone.
So again, thinking about the different quality of sound you got there, the lavalier was pretty good. The boom microphone was pretty good. The ones on the newer computers, the built-ins are not bad at all. The iPhone sound was pretty good. The landline, a little muffled, but you could make it work if you had to. So trying to be creative about what your circumstances are and what you need. And of course, if you have multiple people, say in a hybrid meeting, where you have multiple people in a location, then you have to figure out some way of managing that feedback. And you might want one of these things like this little Jabra. I have one group that meets on Fridays that's not a Toastmasters group, but there are 6 of us or so around a big round table. And we just set the little Jabra in the middle and we use that. Everybody else who turns on a device comes in with no audio at all. And so this works for both speaker and microphone. And that way it picks up all the people around the table. With our Advanced Toastmasters of Asheville group, it's a little bit bigger group and a little bit bigger setting. So we have 2 of them. And this Jabra is, I think, a 510, but the 710s, you can daisy chain 2 together, put one in one part of the room, the other in a different part of the room, and get the whole group to be audible to the Zoom participants. So a way to think about what kinds of things you might use for group. And this, exactly what Susan said earlier in her chat. You can want to share what you want and not what you don't. Remember to mute and unmute. How often do we hear, you're muted, you're muted, you're muted? Or please mute, please. And especially when you have those lavalier mic, don't forget to turn it off. If you're having to take a little bio break or something, just polite to share all that. Or your little dog who might be unhappy, or the children, or whatever else may be happening. One of my strategies is to try to remember to even take my landline phone and remove it from the room where I'm presenting. Whew, okay, well, we've talked about a lot of visual, a lot of audio, and what's really in that all the rest? A couple things that are pro tips. When you are having to share a photo or a PowerPoint, how do you make sure that you share what you want? Oh, if I really wanted to share the thing about the email, my email is well written and sent, and oh, I forgot the attachment. But you see, you're seeing my whole screen. You see all my files over there. You see the little thing about revenge and no. You want to just share the window that has what you want others to see. And of course, the other thing that's always a challenge, when you go into PowerPoint, you don't want to show them your editing screen. You want them to just see your presentation. And there's a little step to do to make sure that that works the way you want it to. All right, now, there's a little bit more of all the rest. We talk lights, camera, action, audio, and thinking about clothing, makeup, jewelry, backgrounds, and potential interruptions. All of them have to be based on knowing your audience. It's a whole different thing if you just hop on a Zoom to have a chat with a friend. But it's a whole different thing if you're having an interview. Do you really want that job? Or maybe you're talking to your boss about this new project that you really want to do. Or maybe there's a problem with a project you're working with a colleague on, and you really need to hash out what's going on. How do you look credible, professional? How do you look like you really have your act together so they can trust you? And that's really what this is all about. Sometimes when you are going pro, you really need the pro tools. You need to use the Zoom advanced screen sharing so that you're a part of your PowerPoint, which I'm using something else today. You might want to use Prezi because sometimes we just get tired of PowerPoint. And this particular thing, I happen to be using OBS. You can use multiple cameras, multiple audio inputs. OBS is open broadcast software. So say I needed to do an interview with maybe I was going to do a podcast and I wanted to do an interview. I could have two cameras going here. I could have one person in one camera and one person in the other camera, and we could actually talk to each other all here in this same room. So there are ways to use things like the open broadcast software, and Tony, my husband, is getting fairly adept at this, but he has figured out some little tricks for doing this, and he's doing a presentation next weekend for District 37 that's going to include a little piece about some of the tricks and techniques you can use. It's a free system, it's a download, and it's not too difficult to learn the basics. That's actually how I'm doing it today, by having my Mac cam inset, which I just turned off, to now have my inset from my webcam along with my PowerPoint, or as you saw at the beginning, where I just had my big camera, my webcam, showing the whole space. So lots of different techniques that you might use. So all the rest also says there might be times that you're going to present in another platform. Say you're going to be presenting for a group that works in a corporate setting on Teams. Yeah, I know. The bad news is that Zoom and Teams aren't exactly alike. All right, well, there you go. And so if you are coming in under a guest email to a corporate site that has a firewall, you may not be able to chat to the different participants. You may not be able to screen share. So I've had a couple circumstances where I was presenting to a group that not only used Teams, which is just slightly different, but they were behind a firewall. I had to send them my presentation ahead of time, and they had to be the one who put it up for display. Rehearsal, checking your systems, always a good plan. I'll offer these resources, and there is a handout that Keith put in the chat that has this on. We did a couple of years ago through Advanced Toastmasters of Asheville, a 3-part video series. Each one was about 25 to 30 minutes. Zoom like a pro, not like a zombie. And so you can go to the atatm.toastmastersclubs.org. It's our free Toast site. On the main menu, you don't have to be logged in, but it's the last thing on the main menu right before the login chunk. You can go to the section called ATA videos, and in there you'll find these videos. And of course, you're welcome to be in touch with me by email. If I don't know the answer, I can probably find someone who can help me figure it out. So let's do a little bit of chatting, and then I have just a couple slides we'll finish up with at the very end. What questions can you think of that we haven't talked about with our little examples that we shared? Yeah, Susan.
I am wondering if you have any advice for how to present while using notes, but without having to look down at your notes. Is there a way to have them somehow in front of you where you're closer to the camera, so you're giving that eye contact and you can see your notes? And I'm not talking about a dissertation, but just something that cues you, here's what I should be saying next.
So one of the things that I have played around with is trying to make sure, on Zoom, it got so easy for us to go back to using our scripts and going back to really using notes to understand that we just want those key words. I have at times now, again, my setup is such that I have large monitors. My computer is over there. Behind the monitor on that wall, there's a bulletin board. So right above the camera, I can have a piece of paper pinned to the wall that has my notes. And then I'm looking a little bit there, and it'll let you in a little bit at the screen to see who's reacting, and then a little bit up there. And so that's one of my tricks. I have also, because I use little square lights on poles, I have occasionally put notes on the pole so that I look here a little bit, I look there a little bit, I look there a little bit, so I'm looking at different. You can put it on the screen itself. If you have a big enough monitor that you can have your notes page maybe right next to your Zoom screen, which is not taking up the entire monitor. Or again, if you have multiple monitors, which I happen to, because I just love having things big, so I don't have to try to fight with seeing them. So that might be my best choices for those, is trying to put, I've played around a couple times too, where I've put things on the edge of the computer monitor, like right there would be one word, and then there over there would be another word. And it reminds me of one time when I was doing an in-person meeting, and I said, oh, I didn't quite have my whole speech memorized quite as well as I wanted to. And I usually just memorize the outline. But I said, oh, I know what I can do. I showed up at the meeting room a little bit early, and on the far back wall, where people would be coming in through the door, I taped 3 pieces of paper with my 3 key words that were going to remind me of the 3 stories I was going to tell in sequence. You can do things like that too.
Thank
But
you.
yeah,
That's helpful.
I think it takes some creativity. What other questions do you all have?
Phyllis, right now, are you using the camera that's built into your computer, or are you using something like external camera?
I'm using an external camera.
And
So-
where is it pinned? That's in your laptop or your computer?
So right now, my laptop is over there on the table. And then here in front of me, I have 2 large monitors that are like 25 inches. On the monitor that I pull up my Zoom screen, on the top of it is where I have my webcam perched. So that's one of my strategies. If I am presenting from here in my home office, I usually have the big monitors and the webcam set up here. If I'm presenting from the library from a hybrid meeting, now I have to get all of that onto my computer, and I have to be using the camera that's right there. But then sometimes what we'll do is we'll set up an iPad partway across the room so that it's looking at the lectern and can focus on the speaker who happens to be at the lectern. But yes, right now I'm using an external webcam. And that's one of the things with OBS too, is you have different options. So I have like 4 camera views in my OBS scenes choices that I can choose from.
Do you have a brand of the external camera that you like particularly?
Let's see, this one happens to be, it's an Nexigo. I think it is. This one happens to be an HD. Tony, you want to chime in here? You have one that you purchased recently that you like that has Zoom capability. So when we're doing hybrid meetings, you remember who makes that one?
Yours is a Nexigo and mine is a Nexigo 4K. And I don't have the remote for it, but I can zoom in, and it doesn't do 4K anymore. It goes down to 1K, but then I can pan left and right within that 4K view. So I was just trying to see where my remote, oh, here it is. So I can zoom in digitally. I can move myself left and right, and a little bit of up and down.
Those are particularly helpful when we do our hybrid meetings, if we're trying to make sure we're focusing on the speaker and the speaker might be moving around. I know that in many of the workplace or educational institutions, they have set up the OWL cameras, which are voice activated. So the OWL camera will go focus on wherever the sound is coming from. They're a good bit more expensive. These cameras, Tony, I don't know, we've spent much over 100 on anything.
Yeah, the 4K Zoom one's about 150 full price. You can sometimes get it on sale. I got a second one for the club for $70 because apparently someone got some excess. So the second one was pretty cheap, but it was used, but it was unabused.
And then the OWL cameras, I think they start around 1,000. Now, several of our corporate clubs have their meeting rooms are set up for hybrid meetings with everything already installed in the room. That is one of the things that makes it a lot smoother than having to go set up in a library where you have to bring the equipment in and take the equipment back out. Very good. Very good. Oh, Chris, I see your comment there about preparing for interviews. Absolutely. Absolutely. What other questions?
I'll offer something. You know, one of the challenges that I have is oftentimes I may not be in a space that I can control easily. You know, it might be, you know, I have to be working at the library, or I can't be working in this office because my wife needs it for some reason and I have to be in another. So what recommendations can you offer for like quick setups to just kind of get us through?
I think really going back to the very basics of trying to make sure you have maybe a portable light that you bring along with you, you know, a gooseneck lamp. Things like these are great, you know, the foldable room dividers, but sometimes you can just take something. My daughter, for the longest time in her apartment, she had a very inexpensive, I think she said she got it from the dollar store for like $2, a little drape that she just thumbtacked to the wall behind her. Depending on where you are, you might be able to do that. I've done meetings where I was at the food pantry and I'm like, okay, where in the world am I going? Okay, I have the best Wi-Fi signal over there, but I have the best background over there. Oh dear, how am I going to do this? So trying to put those things together and say, where can I get decent lighting? Where can I have a controlled? Sometimes you just find a corner that you can be in the corner, so you have some control over what's going on behind you. Because normally in our offices, we're the other way around. We're trying not to have our back into the corner. But when we're on Zoom, having our back into the corner gives a little more control over what's going on back there. Yeah, I think that the biggest challenge is trying to find a corner and a place where we've got Wi-Fi. I know one time I was doing a Zoom meeting from the food pantry and I managed to find a little corner where I could park, and I didn't have very good Wi-Fi signal. So I grabbed my phone quick and plugged in a hotspot. Okay, I've got to balance this somehow because I knew I couldn't be out in the main multi-purpose room where there was all sorts of mayhem going on. It's always interesting. So Susan, you said you have talk about those portals.
Sure. They are called meta portals. We had gotten spoiled by a member who was higher up the Toastmaster organization, so she had an OWL. And we couldn't afford that, of course, with our small club budget. But we were able to get these meta portals. Two members in our club also belonged to another club, and they had been using them for some time. They brought theirs and we fell in love with them. So we have some wanderers in front, you know, that talk. And this actually has the microphone as well as the camera built in. We use two of them. One faces toward our audience and the other one faces toward the projection up on the wall. And it works great. So the thing is knowing how to set them up. So there's something you have to do with I believe a Facebook logon in order to get it to work the first time. So we took a couple meetings experimenting with that and we love them. That's what we've been using.
Do you have any recall as to how much they cost? I haven't priced them.
I think they were under 200 for two. You can check, sometimes Best Buy has some sales going on. I know we hit a sale. And I also know that things have gone up quite a bit in the last 6 months since we purchased them. But I would just try and get your best one, but don't eliminate Best Buy because it's a big box store, really specific to equipment. I would check there too.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, I think it's worth exploring a little bit and thinking about sharing purchases with amongst clubs if you're a member of multiple clubs or you have friends who are in other clubs. As it turns out, with me being in 3 clubs, my husband and I are in all 3 of those clubs. One of the clubs our daughter is in, one of the clubs our son is in, and one of them it's just the 2 of us. So, I guess we need to have another kid. So no. Okay. All right. So let's do this. Let's kind of finish up here. And then if there are other questions, I can let you, I'll hang around for a couple minutes. Really, we want to kind of wrap this whole thing up by talking about the fact that our looking good requirement is sort of a range of things. It is the visual, it is the audio, and it is using those pro skills and tools when you need them to make sure that you're accommodating the audience that you are working with. Do you remember how when you first joined Toastmasters and started listening for ahs and ums and filler words? After a while, you couldn't not hear them. I'm hoping tonight I haven't ruined you for watching other things on the screen and that you won't be critiquing everything you see, but I might have called your attention to a few things that you think, I might try something. And that's your call to action tonight. I want you to pick one area, just one thing that we've talked about. Maybe it's a visual, an audio, or maybe it's one of these tools. Make the commitment to try one new thing at your next meeting. This week, try one new thing. Toastmasters is all about learn by doing, and the only way we learn is to keep trying to push ourselves outside of what we already know. My friends, it's been a pleasure to be here with you. Keith, thank you for inviting me. Carol, thank you for thinking of me when your computer went on its unauthorized trip extension. And it certainly has been fun to be here among you. I hope we get a chance to meet again on this screen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Phyllis. It was an honor to have you, and we're always grateful to have speakers coming in from outside of our district, because after a while, for those of us that have been around a while, we kind of get used to the same people talking over and over again, and so this was not only informative, it's very refreshing. So thanks again.
Very good. I will put my contact information down here. Keith also has both my phone number and my email. On that handout, you'll find my email is Phyllis. Well, let's see if I can get it to type in this space here. .Kombol. Did I spell it right? It's an hour later on this end of the country. Gmail.com 704-763-1970. There we go. Now, you're welcome to get in touch with me. My clubs, again, Keith can tell you a little bit about those. In the handout, I specifically talked about ATA meets the 3rd Saturday of every month between 9 and 11, but when we do hybrid, we have to shift our time a little. Our McDowell Weekly Club meets at 5:30. So we always have the Zoom component. So it's mcdowellnc.toastmastersclubs.org. And my Eat Your Words, you're welcome to show up in the Concord, North Carolina, along the I-85 corridor. We're meeting this coming Wednesday in just a few days at Sophie's Steakhouse. We have a grab bag. Everybody pulls their roll out of the grab bag. So you show up and you have no idea what role you're going to take. You must have a speech ready just in case you pull speaker 1 or speaker 2. it's always a challenge, and we always have a lot of fun with that club as well. Again, it's been a pleasure being with you. I certainly have enjoyed.
Thanks,
I'll
everyone.
probably call on you all to present the same story. You know, we always hear the same voices. We need to have different voices. I'll probably call on one of you at some point to
All
come
right.
talk for us at District 37.
Make sure you do. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Yep. Bye-bye.
It's been a pleasure.